What's up everyone, the Game2K2 here again, and today I'm doing something a little different. While I was raised in the NES, SNES, and Sega Genesis eras, I was mostly raised on the consoles dating from the mid-90s to the present era, the PS1, PS2, N64, Xbox, Xbox 360, etc. And I can name plenty of great games, but there are always the bad ones. While some great games become classics, for some reason some bad games become classics as well, but obviously for different reasons. So today I'm doing my top 10 worst video games from 1995 to 2011. The reason why I'm doing this particular time frame is because, like I stated before, I was raised in that era, and I would like to leave the earlier eras to the angry video game nerd and that other guy. Just remember that these are my choices, so don't go nuts if you don't agree. Although I can name a bunch of bad games right off the bat, these are going to be games that I have played and not just heard about. Because if I were to do the list like that, this would be a top 100 list. So, let's not waste any more time, let's begin. Number 10. Iron Man 2. While the first Iron Man wasn't exactly good either, in fact it's almost just as terrible, but the key word to that is almost, so it just barely misses this list. Movie-based games are usually always terrible with the occasional exceptions, but unfortunately those occasions are very rare. You would think that with all the great action that was in the film, that Sega would have plenty to work off of when it came to the adaptation. But all it is really is senseless and repetitive action that just repeats itself over and over and over. The really sad part is that it was Sega who developed this game. For a company that's trying to redeem their once golden reputation, they sure don't seem to be trying very hard at the moment. Iron Man 2 the movie? Awesome. Iron Man 2 in the game? Crap. Number 9. Tony Hawk Ride. Now while I will admit that the Tony Hawk's franchise did not get off to a good start on the newer consoles, the games still weren't by any means terrible games. However, every single developer felt like taking advantage of the growing popularity of motion controls, and sure enough, Activision decided to do it with their Tony Hawk's franchise. This was a stupid idea from the beginning because the Tony Hawk's franchise, all the way up until Proving Ground, was based on a regular control scheme and worked perfectly on a controller. And the motion control skateboard that was designed for Ride, while very cool looking, was far too limited. Because of the limited movements of the board, you would try to perform one move and it would wind up doing another, and this would happen constantly. To make matters worse, the levels stunk and there was little to no variety with the gameplay. So pretty much Activision's attempt to revive their popular franchise pretty much killed their popular franchise. Number 8. Hitman 1 Codename 47. While this franchise would wind up being a classic franchise in its own right, the first game wasn't nearly as good as its follow-ups. A lot of people have said that this was for various reasons, such as it being the first time this style of gameplay had ever been tested, and IO Interactive just wasn't used to developing it. Others have said it was a budget reason and time constraint reasons, but for whatever reason, does it change the fact that it was a bad game? Not at all. If you haven't played this game, picture Hitman 2 without the fun, most of the action, and above all, challenge. There was potential with the game, but it wound up being marred by some really fatal flaws, and most of them I just stated. Graphically, it was a very impressive looking game and was one of the nicest looking games from 2000, which makes it really unfortunate that the game turned out as bad as it did. So overall, a great series, but with a horrible start. Number 7. Sonic Shuffle. Sonic is easily one of the most iconic characters in video game history. However, you wouldn't really know that if you saw Sega's latest efforts with the character, and none are more insane than Sonic Shuffle for the Dreamcast. This Mario Party wannabe is not only weird, but incredibly boring. It wasn't necessarily a bad concept, but the way the final product looked was horrible. I just recently got my hands on this game, and playing it once was all I could take. The minigames are sloppy, and the loading times are unbelievably slow. I feel so bad for the Sonic character because there was a time that I actually felt that the Sonic character was better than the Mario character. But unfortunately, the character can't seem to get a break in today's gaming world. Number 6. Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. Remember how I said that movie adaptations are usually always terrible? Well, they don't get much worse than Rise of the Silver Surfer. It's amazing that the two movie adaptations so far on this list are comic book movie adaptations. That's kind of sad. Rise of the Silver Surfer is a repetitive and uneven mess. The action is uneventful and boring. I'm sorry, I think it's a sin that Take-Two Interactive, one of the best companies in today's world of video games, is attached to this game. And Visual Concepts, another great video game company, is the one who developed it. The development is lazy, the gameplay is non-existent, and the story is too hard to follow. While the Fantastic Four movies are lame and lazy in their own right, I'd rather watch a marathon of them playing over and over and over again rather than playing this game for 1 hour. Number 5. Dave Mirra's Freestyle BMX. Since Activision's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 became unbelievably popular, Acclaim was looking to take advantage, except instead of skateboarding, they did BMX with Dave Mirra's Freestyle BMX. Well, to their credit, it was a great idea and got gamers interested before its release. Little did we all know that the game would yet be another poor effort by Acclaim to get their good reputation back. The graphics stunk, the levels were small and pointless, and the game lacked tricks on the bike, which is really something you need to make these games fun. Somehow the game spawned a sequel which was loads better but wasn't nearly enough to save Acclaim from certain doom. So overall, this Tony Hawk's Pro Skater wannabe lacks spark. Number 4. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. I'm sorry, I despise this game. For the first game ever to feature these two iconic characters together, this is not exactly what I had in mind. The game featured the main characters from the Mario franchise squaring off with the main characters from the Sonic franchise and facing each other in a series of games such as running, swimming, table tennis, etc. However, some slow-to-react motion controls and some events being too similar to each other makes this game a frustrating experience. Now, I have an idea for a Mario vs. Sonic game, and tell me what you think. I think the game should be a Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter type of game, when you have to select a character from the Mario franchise and a character from the Sonic franchise and have them beat the crap out of each other. What do you think? Number 3. The Godfather 2. Now, to be honest, the first Godfather game was not perfect either. The game was a little too slow-paced, the open-world setting wasn't perfect, and the game suffered from a few glitches, but despite all of that, it was still a pretty enjoyable game and made fans of the movies happy. So when a sequel was announced, we thought immediately that the game was going to be way better, because usually developers learn from their mistakes and makes the games much more enjoyable. And this is something that has become expected with the open-world genre. However, the game will become one of EA's worst games of the decade, if not more. The game was obviously not finished because not only does it look terrible from a visual standpoint, but also from a gameplay standpoint. The gameplay is even more repetitive than the first game, and the AI is unbelievably stupid. As far as the visuals go, let's put it this way. There are moments when objects float in mid-air. That shows how glitchy it is. Number 2. 3 Extreme. What? You've never heard of 3 Extreme? Well, good for you. This is actually one of the very first games I ever played for my PlayStation, and it was awful. Now, most people are familiar with its predecessor, 2 Extreme, which is notable for being one of the first extreme sports games in history. So it was natural that a sequel would follow. Ironically, the game will release 4 months before the extreme sport mega hit, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. However, while 2 Extreme was pretty good, 3 Extreme lacked way too much. The tricks weren't fully realized, and the graphics were horrible. To top it all off, the controls were unbelievably unresponsive. That's really all I can say, because there isn't one redeemable quality to this game. I love extreme sports, but this game didn't even appeal to that demographic, which is sad. And number 1. Superman for the N64. Anyone raised in this particular generation of gaming probably knew this game was going to be on this list. But is it deserving of the number 1 spot? Well, let's put it this way. If I were to do a top 10 worst list of games made in the last 30 years, this would still be number 1. I have never played a game this broken. Often called Superman 64 by gaming fans, this game is infamous for its poor gameplay design, horrible graphics, and having about as much action as the movie Steel Magnolias. I was one of the poor souls who unfortunately got this game when it first released and became bored with it after only an hour. The game was developed by Titus Software, which is a company that's actually become famous for their terrible games. In fact, I consider them like the LGN of their generation because, like LGN, they became famous for taking famous licenses and tearing them to shreds. While there's a long list of bad Superman games, none are worse than Superman for the N64. Well, that's my top 10 worst video games from 1995 to the present. Like I stated before, sometimes bad games become classics in their own right, because they are so bad that none of us ever forget them, and sometimes I think the developers do that purposely. Well, everyone, that's it for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.